The first thing they found was the blood. Not a pool, not a trail, a handprint, pressed against the inside of the emergency exit door of Warehouse 14. 5 streaked fingers dragged downward, as if someone had tried to hold on to the metal itself while being pulled away. By the time Detective Rachel Monroe stepped beneath the yellow tape, the rain had already begun washing the outer concrete clean. Inside, the air still smelled metallic. Still, the call came in at 20:17 a.m. Single gunshot reported near the Old Freight District. Abandoned shipping complex. No registered business operations. Patrol arrived 6 minutes later. They found the body face down between 2 rusted pallet racks. Male, late 30s. Civilian clothes. No wallet. No phone. No vehicle nearby. Execution-style wound to the back of the head. But the blood on the door didn't belong to him. If you think this is just another warehouse homicide, pause. Look closer. Because what unfolded inside Warehouse 14 wasn't random violence. It was choreography. And someone miscalculated. Rachel didn't speak as forensic lights flooded the concrete floor in sterile white. Roland stood near the entrance, notebook open, reconstructing the geometry before the technicians finished marking evidence cones. The victim lay approximately 14 feet from the emergency exit. Gunshot stippling suggested close range, less than 2 feet. No shell casing immediately visible. That meant either a revolver or a cleanup. Rachel crouched beside the body. No defensive wounds on the hands. No bruising consistent with restraint. He didn't see it coming, Roland said quietly. Rachel's eyes shifted to the door. Someone did. The blood on the exit handle had already begun drying along the edges. Smear pattern angled downward at approximately 45 degrees. Height from floor 5 feet, 8 inches. Adult, likely male, and not the victim. Forensics confirmed within the hour 2 blood types. One matched the deceased. The other did not. There were no drag marks. No additional footprints beyond those contaminated by responding officers. No tire impressions out except old freight grooves filled with rainwater. The warehouse had been empty for years. So why here? Rachel walked the perimeter slowly, counting the structural columns. 11 down each side. Skylights shattered long ago. No working cameras. Except that wasn't entirely true. Roland found it first. Mounted above the internal loading bay. An aftermarket surveillance unit. Newer. Cleaner than anything else in the building. But the wires had been cut. Cleanly. Someone had installed temporary surveillance inside an abandoned warehouse. That changed the narrative. This wasn't opportunistic. It was planned. At 3:41 a.m., lab confirmed the secondary blood type was O, negative. Rare. Roughly 7% of the population. Rachel didn't react outwardly, but Roland saw the shift in her posture. Subtle, tightened shoulders. The kind that suggested memory. There had been another case. 2 years ago. A double homicide near the river docks. Both victims shot. Scene partially staged. A single O negative trace found on a broken window pane. Never matched, never identified, and officially closed as gang retaliation. Rachel had disagreed. She still did. Back inside Warehouse 14, they found something else. Under the victim's left sleeve, fresh adhesive residue, like medical tape had recently been removed. Roland frowned. Injection site? Forced. Rachel replied. Toxicology would confirm later high concentration of midazolam in the bloodstream. Sedative. Fast-acting. He had been conscious long enough to stand, not long enough to fight, which meant the blood on the door likely belonged to someone else entirely, someone injured during the encounter, or someone who panicked. The autopsy later revealed something subtle, slight bruising on the right wrist. Not enough for restraint marks, more like a firm grip. 2 participants, at least. 1 sedated victim, 1 shooter, and 1 injured third party. 3 people minimum inside a sealed warehouse. No vehicle, no witnesses, no noise complaints beyond the single gunshot, which suggested suppressor. Professional. But professionals don't leave blood. Rachel stood near the exit door again as daylight filtered in through cracked skylights. She ran a gloved finger near, but not touching, the dried smear. Pressure pattern, she said. Roland stepped closer. Explain. They weren't escaping, she replied. They were bracing. If someone had been shot near the pallet racks, why was the secondary blood at the exit? Reconstruction placed the victim upright near the center aisle before impact. which meant the O-negative individual had moved toward the door after the gunshot. Injury likely occurred during or immediately after the shot. Possibility 1, accidental discharge wound. Possibility 2, struggle over the weapon. Possibility 3, betrayal. At 9:12 a.m., identification came through. Victim Arvind Kale. Logistics consultant. Clean record. No gang affiliations. Financials stable. But his call history showed something unusual. 3 calls within the last 48 hours to a prepaid number, now deactivated. Pinged once near the freight district. Rachel studied the map overlay. That phone was inside this building yesterday afternoon, Roland said. So this wasn't a midnight ambush. No. It was a meeting. Voluntary. Arvind Kale walked into Warehouse 14 expecting a transaction. Instead, he was sedated and executed. The question wasn't why. It was what went wrong. Because something had. The warehouse floor told a story of controlled movement. No overturned crates. No frantic scuff patterns. Minimal blood spatter outside the primary wound zone. Order. Until the door. Rachel requested luminol sweep across the loading dock. Resulty faint secondary droplets leading not outside, but back inside. Small. Circular. Consistent with a hand wound. Directionality suggested the O-negative individual moved from the exit back toward the pallet racks before leaving. Why return? Roland considered it. To retrieve something. Rachel nodded once. And that meant whatever they came for was important enough to risk staying injured at the scene. At noon, forensics recovered a partial print from the cut surveillance wiring casing. Not enough for full ID, but enough to determine right-hand dominant, the same side as the likely injury, which meant the injured party cut the wires, possibly after being wounded. Timeline narrowed. Sedation administered. Victim positioned. Shot fired. Unexpected event. Injury to accomplice. Accomplice attempts to exit. Stops. Returns. Disables camera. Leaves. That sequence implied something critical. The surveillance was meant to record the execution, not prevent it. Someone wanted footage, but they didn't want investigators to have it, which meant the footage had been captured elsewhere. Roland felt it before Rachel voiced it. This wasn't about killing Arvind Kale. Rachel's eyes remained fixed on the empty pallet rack ahead. It was about sending something to someone else. Execution as message. Warehouse as studio. And an unknown audience. By late afternoon, lab confirmed no additional DNA matches in national databases for the O-negative sample, which meant either clean record or professional discipline. Rachel stood alone in her office after the evidence briefing. The file from 2 years ago sat open on her desk. River Docks homicide. Same blood type. Similar staging. Different victim profile. Same silence afterward. She didn't believe in coincidence, and she didn't believe this was finished. Because if someone was documenting executions, then Arvind Kale was not the first, and not the last. Roland's voice cut through the quiet. There's one more thing. Rachel turned. Traffic cam caught a vehicle leaving the freight district at 2:24 a.m. black SUV. Temporary plates. Partial match to a rental fleet reported missing this morning. Driver visible. Obscured. But he handed her the still frame, passenger side window, hand resting against the glass, bandaged, right hand. Rachel stared at it for several seconds. 7% of the population. 2 crime scenes, 1 unresolved past, and now a pattern forming in concrete and blood. Run every hospital within 50 miles for walk-in-hand lacerations between midnight and 6 a.m., she said. Roland paused. You think they slipped?
No.
Her voice was steady. I think they were pushed. And somewhere in the city, someone was reviewing footage that investigators weren't supposed to see. Warehouse 14 was only the opening move. The real message hadn't surfaced yet. But it would, because people who film executions rarely stop at one. At 4:36 p.m., the first hospital call came back negative. No walk-in patients reporting gunshot-related injuries. No hand lacerations matching deep tissue trauma. No emergency stitching logged under unidentified status. Which meant one of 2 things. Either the injured party had medical training, or they had help. Rachel stood before the digital board in the task room. 3 names now written clean black marker Arvind Kale. Deceased unknown O-negative. Injured unknown shooter. Active Roland adjusted the timeline. Sedation administered approximately 30 to 40 minutes before death, he said. Midazolam levels suggest controlled dosing, not guesswork. Rachel nodded. Medical access. Or veterinary. Unlikely concentration for that. He didn't argue. The toxicology report revealed something else. Trace lidocaine present at the injection site. Local anesthetic. The sedative had been delivered carefully, minimizing pain, minimizing struggle. Whoever orchestrated this wasn't improvising. They were precise. By 16:10 p.m., traffic analysis confirmed the black SUV had passed 3 intersections after leaving the freight district. The temporary plates traced back to a private leasing company. Vehicle reported stolen 12 hours earlier from an airport parking structure. No signs of forced entry, which suggested cloned key access. Professional. Inside the warehouse, forensics completed ballistic reconstruction. Single 9mm round recovered from the pallet rack behind the victim. Suppressor residue confirmed on powder analysis. No casing found. Revolver was ruled out. Shooter retrieved brass. Roland tapped the evidence photo. That means they were calm enough to collect it, even after the injury. Rachel's gaze remained on the smear pattern. Unless the injured one wasn't the shooter. Silence settled. 3 rolls. Possibly overlapping. Execution required at least one person willing to pull the trigger. But staging required intention beyond violence. At 7:22 p.m., cybercrimes called. They'd traced Arvin Kale's prepaid contact history further back than expected. The burner number had communicated not just with Kale, but with 4 other numbers over the past 6 months. All prepaid. All deactivated within days of contact. 2 of those 4 belonged to individuals now listed as missing. Missing persons reports filed quietly. No public attention. 1 freelance journalist. 1 small-scale contractor. Both last seen agreeing to private consultation meetings. Rachel's jaw tightened. Locations. Roland flipped to the next screen. Industrial zones. Isolated properties. Always abandoned or temporarily vacant structures. A pattern. Meet, set it, execute, record, and erase. But something had changed at Warehouse 14. Because someone blood, which meant control had fractured. Rachel requested immediate review of the 2 missing persons' last known locations. One site, an old cold storage unit, had already been demolished. The other, a shuttered textile mill, still stood. Search warrant approved by midnight. When they entered the mill at 1:18 a.m., dust hung undisturbed in most areas, except one section, near the central weaving floor. Tripod indentation marks faintly visible beneath grime. Roland crouched. Camera placement. Rachel scanned the space. No blood visible. But luminol told a different story. 2 impact zones. Cleaned. Thoroughly, yet still present. She exhaled slowly. Same choreography. Execution center stage. Camera aligned. Controlled narrative. Roland walked toward a side office and stopped. Rachel. Inside the drawer of a metal desk sat something wrapped in plastic. A memory card. Sealed. Deliberate. Not forgotten. Left. Rachel held it between gloved fingers. If this is bait, it's working. Back at the lab, the card revealed encrypted video files. High resolution. 3 folders. 2 labeled with dates matching the missing persons. 1 labeled only 14. Warehouse 14. The file had not been uploaded anywhere. Not yet. They opened the earliest video first. The footage was steady. Fixed angle. Victim seated in a metal chair under industrial lighting. Conscious. Sedation evident in slowed movements. Off-camera voice speaking calmly. Distorted electronically. No visible face. Only silhouette. The journalist asked one question before the gunshot ended the recording. Who is this for? The second video followed similar structure. The contractor attempted negotiation. The voice replied, documentation ensures compliance. Then execution. No theatrics. No visible emotion. Just efficiency. Rachel paused the playback. Zoomed the reflection. In the metal support beam behind the victim, barely perceptible, was movement. A second figure. Holding something. Not a weapon. A tablet. Recording the recording. Roland stared. Redundancy. Rachel nodded. The camera is stage 1. The tablet is insurance. Which meant there was a distribution layer beyond the warehouse equipment. Warehouse 14 footage was next. The file timestamp confirmed recording began at 1:53 a.m. Arvin Kale stood upright, hands visible. He was speaking. This wasn't the agreement. The distorted voice responded. Agreements evolve. A frame flickered slightly. Midazolam already active. Cale swayed. Then, unexpected motion. From the right edge of the frame, the secondary figure stepped closer than in previous recordings. Too close. The shooter lifted the suppressed handgun. The shot fired. But in that split second, the secondary figure flinched forward. Impact. Not from bullet. From recoil misalignment. The suppressor clipped the edge of the metal chair as Cale collapsed. The shooter adjusted, but too late. Blood appeared on the secondary figure's hand. They staggered. Dropped something. Small black. Rachel leaned forward. Enhance. The object hit the floor near Cale's shoe. Then the camera view jolted slightly, as if someone had brushed the tripod. Video continued for 12 more seconds. Then cut. Roland exhaled slowly. That's when they moved to the door. Yes. And came back. Rachel's eyes narrowed. To retrieve that, they rewound the frame. The dropped object was rectangular, hard to distinguish, but approximately the size of a key fob, or a data transmitter. Rachel turned to Roland. If they were live streaming, then the audience saw the mistake. Silence. This wasn't documentation for archive. It was performance for a client, and someone had just watched their contractors lose control. Rachel's phone vibrated. Cybercrimes again. We found something, the analyst said. Dark web forum flagged a post 4 hours ago. Subject line introduction delay. Attached was a still image, low resolution. Warehouse 14 frame Arvind Cale mid-collapse. Timestamp overlay identical, and beneath it, one line of text. Correction required. Rachel's pulse remained steady. But the room felt smaller. They're communicating publicly, Roland said. No. She replied. They're signaling privately. Someone inside that forum knew what Warehouse 14 was supposed to look like. And it didn't, which meant pressure was building on the perpetrators. Pressure leads to mistakes, but it also leads to escalation. Rachel requested immediate trace attempts on forum activity. Encryption layers thick. User accounts disposable. But metadata suggested something critical. The post originated locally, within city limits. Whoever wrote, correction required, was not overseas. Not anonymous behind multiple international relays. They were close. Roland looked at the board again. 3 names, 3 roles, now possibly 4. Client, audience, director, shooter, and injured assistant. Rachel closed the video file slowly. If they're correcting, she said quietly, then they're planning another. Roland didn't ask when. He asked where. Rachel stared at the still image of Warehouse 14. They won't use the same mistake twice. Which meant the next execution would be cleaner, faster, more controlled, and likely soon, because clients who demand correction rarely tolerate delay. Outside, night deepened over the freight district. Inside a private network, someone waited for proof. Warehouse 14 had not been the message. It had been the rehearsal. And now, somewhere in the city, a wounded accomplice was either being treated or being replaced. Either way, the production was not finished. At 2:03 a.m., Rachel stopped looking at what had happened. She started looking at what would happen next. The pattern across 3 executions revealed more than staging. It revealed scheduling behavior. Each victim had been contacted within 72 hours of death. Each meeting location was secured less than 24 hours before use. Surveillance equipment installed temporarily, then removed. Fast deployment. Minimal footprint. That meant the perpetrators were not maintaining permanent kill sites. They were mobile, which introduced vulnerability. Rachel ordered full geospatial analysis of all abandoned industrial properties within a 10-mile radius, prioritizing structures with recent short-term power surges or unauthorized electrical draws. If they were installing lighting and cameras, they needed power. Even portable generators left traces. Fuel purchases, noise complaints, delivery records. Roland added another layer. Cross-reference short-term warehouse rentals. Storage units. Film permits. Rachel looked at him. Film permits. If this is performance, someone may be masking it as production. It was unconventional. But this case had already moved beyond conventional homicide. By 4:11 a.m., utilities flagged 2 anomalies over the past week. One was legitimate, an overnight construction crew. The second was not, A derelict packaging facility on the East Rail Spur registered a 3-hour power activation 2 nights prior. No registered tenant, no permit. Power shut off manually from inside. Rachel didn't hesitate. They assembled a quiet entry team before sunrise. The facility door showed no forced entry. Inside, the air carried faint gasoline residue. Portable generator confirmed. Recently removed. But the floor told a clearer story. Tripod impressions. Again. But positioned differently this time, not centered, offset. Improved angle control. Rachel walked the perimeter slowly. No blood, Roland said. Not yet. In a side corridor, they found something else. Medical packaging. Empty vial casing for midazolam. Late expiration. Recent batch code. Rachel photographed the label. Trace the distributor. Roland nodded. Near the far wall, something metallic glinted beneath debris. He crouched. A small black casing. Cracked. Impact damage visible. Rachel knelt beside him. It was the same object shape seen dropping in the Warehouse 14 footage. Rectangular. About 2 inches long. She held it carefully. Transmitter. Forensics would later confirm encrypted wireless relay device, capable of live streaming via cellular burst transmission. Battery compartment fractured. Internal board damaged, meaning the Warehouse 14 feed likely cut prematurely because of this device's failure, which explained the dark web post. Production delay. Correction required. The live feed had malfunctioned, and someone important noticed. Roland stood. They're testing upgrades. Rachel's eyes scanned the facility again. This wasn't used. Die run. Yes. No body, no victim, just calibration. They were preparing. At 7:26 a.m. lab called. The midazolam batch traced to a private surgical supply distributor. One account had purchased small quantities over several months. Registered to a shell company. Company listed as audiovisual consulting firm. Rachel didn't react outwardly. But Roland saw it. Film permit theory wasn't theory anymore. They pulled the business registration. Minimal online presence. No client portfolio. One listed director. Name Neil Rathor. Clean record. Background in biomedical engineering. Short stint in a post-production studio 5 years ago. Left abruptly. Rachel studied his photo. Composed expression. Measured gaze. Not overtly violent. But violence here wasn't impulsive. It was curated. Roland pulled financials. Shell company receiving cryptocurrency transfers. Irregular amounts. Large. Rachel leaned back slightly. Private contracts. For what? She didn't answer immediately, because the answer was forming. Not random targets. Not gang hits. Not revenge. This was bespoke violence. Commissioned. Delivered. Documented. The missing journalist had been investigating corporate corruption. The contractor had testified in a zoning dispute. Arvind Kale, logistics consultant, had recently flagged discrepancies in a private defense subcontract. All three had intersected with high-value commercial conflicts. Rachel circled the names. Someone is outsourcing elimination. Roland exhaled slowly, with cinematic proof of completion. At 9:02 a.m., Cybercrimes updated. The forum post, production delay, had received one reply. Single word. Deadline. Timestamped 32 minutes earlier. Rachel didn't like that. Deadlines compress time. Compressed time increases risk, which meant the next execution window was narrowing. They issued quiet surveillance on Neil Rathor's listed address. Apartment empty. Utilities active. Minimal furniture. No obvious forensic evidence. But the trash chute told another story. Inside one discarded bag, sterile gloves. Blood trace inside one fingertip. Oh, negative. Rachel stared at the lab confirmation screen. Assistant, Roland said quietly. Or director. The bag also contained packaging for advanced signal boosters. Live stream quality upgrades. Correction phase active. Rachel mapped Rathor's recent phone pings. Burner device. Last active ping near a private airstrip south of the city. That location shifted the scale. If clients were external, international even. Then jurisdiction became complicated. At noon, they intercepted a new forum post. No text, just coordinates. Encrypted format. Cybercrimes decoded it within minutes. Coordinates corresponded to a storage complex scheduled for auction demolition in 3 days. Rachel's jaw tightened. They're accelerating. Roland checked the calendar. 3 days is public. Too public. She shook her head. This isn't demolition timing. He looked at the timestamp. 48 hours from now. Exactly. Deadline. 2 days. Rachel issued immediate warrant for covert surveillance of the storage complex. They installed remote optics across perimeter structures, unmarked, silent. Because if this was another staged execution, they couldn't spook it. They needed proof. Client identification. Chain of custody beyond the shooter. By late evening, motion sensors flagged activity. One individual entered Unit 47, face partially obscured, carrying equipment case, right hand bandaged. Rachel watched the live feed without speaking. The individual unlocked the unit. Inside, industrial lighting rig already mounted, pre-positioned, which meant preparation began before the forum coordinates were posted. The post was an invitation. It was confirmation. Roland zoomed in. Bandage wrapped tight across palm and index finger, consistent with suppressor recoil laceration. Rachel's voice remained level. Shooter. Where's Rathor? As if answering the question, a second figure entered frame 15 minutes later. Uninjured, carrying tablet, confident posture. Roland swallowed. Director. Rachel leaned forward slightly. Wait. They watched in silence as equipment was arranged. Tripod aligned. Chair positioned. Lighting tested. No victim yet, but everything else mirrored prior executions, except for one detail. This time, the camera angle was higher, adjusted, corrected, learning curve active. Rachel's phone buzzed again. Cybercrimes. New forum update. Single line. Final cut. Timestamp now. Rachel's gaze never left the screen. They're about to bring someone in. Roland glanced at the tactical clock. 48-hour window compressed to hours. Rachel exhaled once. Controlled. Notify tactical. But if we move too soon, we'll lose the client. She nodded. And if we wait too long, why lose another body? Silence. Warehouse 14 had been rehearsal. This was correction. And whoever sat behind that encrypted forum account was expecting perfection. Outside Unit 47, the bandaged shooter stepped briefly into frame again. He adjusted the suppressor carefully. Precise. Disciplined. No hesitation visible now. The mistake from Warehouse 14 had been absorbed, adapted, which meant tonight's execution would be cleaner, unless Rachel disrupted it. She watched the empty chair in the center of Unit 47, waiting, and somewhere nearby, someone was being transported, sedated, unaware that their death had already been scheduled as content. Rachel spoke without raising her voice. We move when the victim enters. Roland nodded. Understood. The production had entered its final phase. But this time, the audience wouldn't be the only ones watching. At 11:42 p.m., headlights swept across the storage complex perimeter. Rachel didn't blink. The tactical team was already in position. Silent units staged 2 blocks out, long-range optics trained on Unit 47. No sirens, no marked vehicles. The operation depended on invisibility. The black van entered through the east access gate using a cloned keycard. Roland checked the feed overlay. Plate is masked. Same vehicle class as the stolen SUV. The van parked 3 units down from 47. Rear doors opened. 2 figures exited. Bandaged shooter. Director. Presumed Rathor. Between them, a third body. Conscious but unsteady. Arms restrained loosely in front. No visible head trauma. Sedation likely administered within the last 10 minutes. Rachel felt the familiar narrowing of focus that came before decisive action. Facial recognition? Running? Roland replied. The victim's face lifted briefly under the floodlight spill. Mid-40s. Male. Recognition pinged. Name's Samir Bashia, Roland said. Compliance auditor. Currently consulting on infrastructure contracts. Rachel's jaw set. Another professional linked to procurement disputes. Another conflict zone. The pattern was no longer subtle. Samir was walked into Unit 47 without resistance. Door shut. Interior lights flared bright. Camera feed inside the unit activated. Wireless intercept successfully patched by cyber team minutes earlier. The tripod stood elevated. Angle corrected. Chair centered. Director adjusted exposure manually on the tablet. Shooter remained still, weapon lowered but ready. Samir attempted to speak. Audio feed faint but audible. This is a mistake. Director responded. Voice undistorted now. Not from our perspective. Rachel leaned closer to the screen. Rathor's face was fully visible in profile. Calm, detached, no visible anger, no haste. This was execution as transaction. Samir sagged slightly as the sedative deepened. Director nodded once. Shooter stepped forward. Suppressor aligned. Rachel raised her hand. Wait. Roland's eyes flicked toward her. She was watching Rathor, not the shooter. There, a subtle glance toward the tablet screen. Not at Samir. At a live indicator. They were broadcasting again. Rachel spoke quickly. Trace outbound signal now. Cyber responded immediately. Multiple layered proxies. But primary uplink is cellular relay. We're isolating handshake. Inside Unit 47, Rathor raised one finger. Shooter paused. They were waiting. Rachel understood instantly. Confirmation. Client acknowledgement before trigger pull. This wasn't autonomous killing. It required approval. Roland's voice tightened. Rachel. 30 seconds, she said quietly. Cyber cut in. Signal bouncing locally before external encryption. We have a node. Location. 500 meters west. Office building. 3rd floor. Rachel didn't hesitate. Split team. Intercept uplink source. Quiet breach. Inside Unit 47, Rathor's tablet chimed softly. Single tone. Approval received. He lowered his finger. Shooter adjusted stance. Rachel's voice was controlled. Go. Tactical units moved simultaneously. One toward Unit 47. One toward the office building. Inside the storage unit, the shooter squeezed. The door exploded inward before the suppressed round discharged. Flash diversion. Controlled breach. Shooter staggered back instinctively. The suppressed shot fired. But wide. Embedding into the side wall, Rathor lunged toward the tablet. Roland shouted through comms. Tablet. An officer tackled Rathor before he could shatter the device. Shooter attempted a secondary draw. Disarmed. Restrained. Within 7 seconds, Unit 47 was secured. Samir Bushia slumped but alive. Sedation deep but stable. Rachel entered only after clearance was given. She walked directly to Rathor. He didn't struggle. Didn't shout. He looked almost curious. You were close, he said evenly. Rachel didn't respond. She picked up the tablet carefully. The livestream interface was still active. One viewer connected. User ID masked. But still present. Roland's voice came through her earpiece. Uplink team breached 3rd floor office. One suspect in custody. Laptop active. Attempting shutdown. Rachel looked at Rathor. Client. He smiled faintly. Investor. In the office building, officers detained a man seated alone in a darkened conference room. Laptop connected to encrypted platform. Livestream paused mid-frame. Viewer window open. Transaction panel visible. Escrow contract labeled Project Correction. Final delivery. Rachel absorbed that phrase silently. Correction. Final delivery. This wasn't about ideology. It wasn't personal. It was performance-based contracting. Inside Unit 47, Samir was stabilized and removed by medical personnel. Shooter remained silent under restraint. Bandage partially soaked through from earlier wound. Rachel studied him closely. You made a mistake at Warehouse 14. No response. But you adapted. Still nothing. Rathor spoke instead. Improvement is part of the service. Roland entered the unit moments later. We've secured the uplink operator. Name is Vikram Sethi. Private equity consultant. Rachel nodded once. Connection. Preliminary records show financial disputes with all 3 prior victims. There it was. Motive layered beneath business. Elimination disguised as outsourced production. Rachel looked back at Rathor. How many contracts? He didn't hesitate. 4. Her voice remained steady. We found 3. Wes. A pause. The 4th was declined. A silence filled the storage unit. Declined. Meaning someone had refused to be eliminated. Or the contract had fallen through. Rachel filed that away. In the office building, forensic imaging of Sethi's laptop revealed archived chats, negotiations, pricing tiers, live performance surcharge, proof of completion guarantees, and a clause titled, Non-Disclosure Through Permanence. Roland read it twice. They marketed murder like media services. Rachel's gaze remained fixed on Rathor. You're not the mastermind. He tilted his head slightly. No? Who built the platform? Rathor's faint smile returned. You think this ends with me? Outside flashing red and blue lights finally illuminated the storage complex as the covert phase transitioned to visible arrest protocol. But Rachel knew visibility didn't equal completion, because encrypted platforms don't emerge from nowhere. and clients willing to pay for bespoke executions don't act alone. As Rathor was escorted out, he glanced once toward the tablet. "The audience always grows," he said quietly. Rachel didn't answer, but she understood the implication. Even with tonight's rescue, 3 were already dead, 1 contract declined, unknown number pending, and somewhere beyond Sethi's laptop, a network existed. Platform developers, payment facilitators, anonymous viewers. Warehouse 14 had been rehearsal. Unit 47 had been correction. But the architecture behind it, that was the real case. Roland stepped beside her as crime scene techs began cataloging equipment. "You stopped it," he said. "For tonight," Rachel replied. "Because systems like this don't collapse with one arrest. They adapt, rebrand, relocate." And as she watched Rathor disappear into the back of a patrol vehicle, Rachel felt something colder settle in. 2 years ago, at the river docks, she had seen the early version of this model. Back then, it had been crude, unrefined. Now it was structured, scalable, professional, which meant someone had learned, improved, expanded. And if there was one thing Rachel Monroe understood, it was that unfinished systems rarely forgive interruption. Somewhere, someone would be watching the arrest footage already circulating internally, analyzing failure, preparing iteration. The production inside Unit 47 had been stopped, but the platform behind it had just been exposed, and exposure creates desperation. Desperation creates escalation. This case was no longer about isolated executions. It was about dismantling an industry, and industries do not surrender quietly. The arrests were clean. The silence afterward was not. By 3:10 a.m., Rathor, the shooter, identified as Karan Mehta, and Vikram Sethi were in separate interrogation rooms. 3 isolated nodes of the same structure. Rachel stood behind the observation glass, not watching their faces, watching their posture. Mehta sat rigid, injured hand now professionally rebandaged by custody medical staff. No visible anxiety, no anger. He wasn't trembling. He was recalculating. Rathor leaned back slightly in his chair, wrists cuffed to the table, expression neutral. His eyes moved occasionally, not scanning for escape, but assessing acoustic reflection in the room. He was measuring sound, habit, control through environmental awareness. Sethi was different. Sweat along his collar, eyes darting. Financial men rarely prepare for confinement. Roland joined Rachel quietly. "Who first?" "Sethi," she replied. "Because investors fracture faster than operators." Inside the interrogation room, Sethi's lawyer hadn't arrived yet. That window was narrow. Rachel entered without file in hand. No visible evidence presentation. Just presence. She sat across from him. "You weren't just watching," she said calmly. "You were approving." Sethi swallowed. "I don't know what you think you saw." The escrow interface showed release authorization pending final confirmation. Silence. His breathing shifted. Rachel didn't push. She waited. Silence in interrogation is pressure without volume. Finally, they said it was reputational resolution. Sethi muttered. Rachel's expression didn't change. They said disputes were handled discreetly, finalized permanently. You understood what that meant. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Roland stepped in. "Who introduced you to Rathor?" Sethi hesitated longer this time. "A referral. From." Long pause. "Closed forum. Invite only. Tiered access." Rachel leaned slightly forward. "Who built the forum?" "I don't know." "You paid into it." "I paid for a service." The word service hung in the air. That was the branding. Murder reframed as solution architecture. Rachel slid a printed still across the table. "Warehouse 14 frame. 3 men are dead," she said evenly. "Because you clicked approve." Sethi's composure cracked. It was business leverage. They were going to expose contracts, destroy infrastructure bids. "Do you know what that does to markets?" Rachel's tone did not rise. "Markets recover. People don't." Sethi's silence deepened. Then, "It wasn't just me." Rachel let that breathe. "How many?" "I only saw 5 client accounts active. 5. 3 confirmed dead. 1 rescued. 1 declined." Rachel absorbed the math. "Declined how?" "They submitted a target profile. Platform moderators rejected it. Said it didn't meet risk criteria." "Risk to who?" "No idea." "Moderators." "Plural." which meant Rathor wasn't the architect. He was a contractor within a larger system. Rachel exited the room without signaling closure. Next, Rathor. Inside, he didn't look up immediately. He listened first, then lifted his eyes. "You intercepted at the approval face," he said. Impressive. Rachel sat. "Who built the platform?" He considered whether to answer. Then, it evolved. From what? Proof of concept recordings. 2 years ago. His gaze sharpened slightly. She had hit timeline correctly. River Docks case. He didn't confirm verbally, but micro-expression did. "You tested it locally first." Rachel continued. "Small distribution pool. Then scaled." He exhaled softly. "Scale requires trust. Or trust requires infrastructure." Silence. She shifted. "Who's above you?" He smiled faintly. "You're assuming hierarchy." "I'm assuming someone coded the escrow mechanism." That did it. A brief flicker in his eyes. "There's a back-end engineer," he said. "But you won't find them." "Why?" "Because they don't exist in one place. Distributed architecture. Fragmented hosting. Decentralized payment routing." Roland entered mid-question. "Where are the servers?" Rathor tilted his head. "You're thinking too physical." Which meant cloud distributed nodes. Ephemeral hosting. Mirrored backups. Rachel changed direction. "Why reject the fourth contract?" Rathor paused longer this time. Then, pattern risk. "Explain." "Target had law enforcement proximity." The air tightened. Rachel didn't react outwardly, but internally, the line drew itself. 2 years ago, River Docks homicide. Oh, negative blood trace. If someone had attempted to contract someone close to her, and the platform rejected it. Then someone had tested her vulnerability. Roland spoke carefully. Who was the target? Rathor met Rachel's eyes directly. "You." Silence filled the room. Measured. Controlled. Rachel's pulse remained steady. "Client. Anonymous. High-tier account. Why reject?" Too visible, too much scrutiny risk, which meant someone with resources had considered eliminating her. 2 years ago, after she reopened the River Docks file unofficially. Rachel stood slowly. Name. Rathor's faint smile returned. "You think clients reveal themselves?" She stepped closer. "You kept logs. Not identities. You kept leverage." That word landed. Leverage was currency in networks like this. Rathor's silence became calculation again. Finally, "There's a vault key." Roland's attention sharpened. "Where?" "Not physical. Location. Fragmented across moderator nodes. You need at least 3. How many moderators?" 5. 5 again. Consistent architecture. Rachel processed rapidly. 5 client accounts active. 5 moderators. 5 nodes required for vault decryption. Symmetry. Structured system. Outside cybercrimes confirmed seizure of Sathi's hardware yielded partial access credentials. But not root. Not backend. Just client interface. Rachel stepped out of interrogation. Roland followed. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yes." He didn't push further. Instead, if they declined a contract on you, that means someone with resources saw you as threat. I was already threat. But high tier. She nodded once. Meaning someone wealthy. Connected. Not a petty rival. Which shifted the River Docks case entirely. That case had never been random. It had been testing ground. Warehouse 14 wasn't rehearsal. River Docks was. Unit 47 was iteration. Rachel stood before the board again. 3 confirmed deceased. 1 rescued. 1 declined. 5 clients active. 5 moderators. Distributed vault. She circled the number 5. "This isn't random scaling," she said quietly. "It's engineered growth." Roland crossed his arms. "So what's next?" Rachel looked toward the interrogation wing. "One, disrupt the moderators before they migrate." Can they? They expected contractor failure, not arrest. Meaning contingency protocols likely already activating. Data wipe triggers. Node migration. Identity burn. Cyber entered moments later. We're seeing back-end traffic spike across the seized laptop's connected network. Rachel's voice sharpened. "They're moving. Looks like fragmentation. Keys splitting. A vault key dispersal. If those fragments relocated beyond jurisdiction, the platform would survive. Different contractors. Same clients. Same model." Rachel didn't hesitate. "Lock down all outbound traffic from seized devices. Mirror everything in real time. Trace moderator node IPs before they ghost. Cyber nodded. Already on it. Roland looked at her. This just went international. Yes. And political. Likely. Because financial elites don't contract executions in isolation, they network. Rachel exhaled slowly. 2 years ago, she had chased a ghost pattern in blood and concrete. Now the ghost had architecture. Names, transactions, structure. But structures adapt when threatened. Rithor had said it clearly. The audience grows. Which meant somewhere, someone was already evaluating risk exposure. Calculating whether containment required more elimination. Rachel felt it, not fear, recognition. The case wasn't closing. It was widening. And if the vault key required 3 moderators to unlock, then at least 3 of them were still free. Somewhere inside a decentralized system that had already tried to remove her once. This wasn't cleanup, it was escalation containment. Rachel looked back at the circled number 5, and for the first time since Warehouse 14, she understood that stopping Unit 47 had only prevented a symptom. The disease was distributed, and it had just realized she was still alive. By 6:40 a.m., the digital battlefield was louder than any warehouse breach. Cybercrimes had isolated outbound traffic from Sethi's seized laptop before full encryption cascade initiated. It wasn't a clean shutdown. It was a fracture. 5 moderator nodes began dispersing authentication fragments across myriad servers in staggered intervals. Not a panic wipe. A contingency protocol. Rachel stood behind the cyber operations desk as lines of scrolling data reflected across her face. Explain it simply, she said. Lead analyst turned from the screen. The vault key isn't stored anywhere whole. Each moderator node holds a fragment. 3 fragments combine to unlock transaction histories and client IDs. And now, they're splitting fragments again, reassigning custody. Can we intercept? Maybe 2. Not all 5. Rachel processed instantly. If they captured at least 3 fragments before migration completed, they could reconstruct vault access. If not, the client layer vanished permanently. Roland joined her. How long? 20 minutes before relocation finalizes. Rachel's voice sharpened. Prioritize geographic clustering. Cyber nodded. 2 nodes are still domestic, 1 likely in Singapore, 1 in Estonia. 5th mass through Tor relay. Domestic first. Rachel authorized emergency digital seizure warrants. Simultaneously, tactical teams were deployed to 2 physical addresses tied to server co-location facilities. If moderators were using hybrid physical-digital custody, someone had to be near infrastructure. At 7:02 a.m., first hit, suburban townhouse, single occupant detained. Name of Viral Khanna, software architect, no criminal record. Servers found in basement rack, running containerized node architecture. Roland reviewed the on-site bodycam feed. Khanna didn't resist. He looked exhausted. They said it was arbitration architecture. Khanna murmured under questioning. Arbitration. Another euphemism. Inside the townhouse, technicians began live memory capture before shutdown. First fragment secured. Rachel didn't allow satisfaction to surface. 1 was not enough. At 7:11 a.m., second team breached a downtown co-working server suite. But the rack was empty. Fresh heat signature, node already migrated. Rachel exhaled slowly. 3rd domestic. Still live, cyber responded. Industrial loft near the river. River. The word carried weight. 2 years ago. River docks homicide. Rachel didn't comment. She moved. Roland followed without asking. The loft building stood half renovated. Private development project. Owned through layered shell companies. Inside, the space was minimalist. Single workstation. 3 external drives connected to a custom-built rig. Moderator node active. Operator present. Female, late 20s. Focused on screen. She looked up only when tactical announced presence. Her expression wasn't fear. It was irritation. You're late, she said calmly. Rachel stepped forward. Migration incomplete. The woman, identified moments later as Lena Varma, didn't deny affiliation. You think shutting this down stops demand? She asked evenly. Demand doesn't concern me. Supply does. Rachel signaled cyber team to begin live capture. Second fragment secured. 2 down. 1 more required. Cyber's voice came through Rachel's earpiece. Singapore node completed migration. Estonia still partially live. Tor relay fragment untraceable. The Estonia was within reach via international cooperation, but not in minutes. Rachel needed domestic advantage. She turned to Lena. Where is the fifth moderator physically located? Lena smiled faintly. You assume physical proximity. Rachel stepped closer. You hold one fragment. You know at least two others. Silence. Then, you're missing the real moderator? Lena said. Roland's attention sharpened. Explain. Contractors and clients believe moderators control architecture. We don't. Rachel felt the shift before she understood it. Who does? Lena held Rachel's gaze. The auditor? The word struck hard. Compliance auditor. Samir Basha, the rescued victim. Rachel's mind recalibrated instantly. If Samir wasn't just a target, if he had been internal oversight, then Unit 47 wasn't just execution. It was containment. Roland spoke carefully. You're saying Basha was part of the system. Lena didn't answer directly. He monitored contract adherence, risk analysis, decline decisions, decline decisions, the rejected contract on Rachel, pattern risk, law enforcement proximity. That was Samir's domain. Rachel felt the architecture shift beneath her. If Samir had audited internal activity and detected irregularities, then someone might have moved to silence him. Not as a client target, but as internal liability. Rachel spoke into comms immediately. Status on Samir Bashisha. Medical unit responded. Stable. Sedation reversing. Secure him. No external access. Full surveillance. She turned back to Lena. Is he a moderator? No. Then what? Fail safe. The word settled heavy. If 3 moderator fragments unlocked the vault, and Samir held oversight authority, then he may hold dynamic authentication component. Human key. Rachel's pulse remained controlled. How many fragments currently active? 3 will suffice, Lena said calmly. Rachel checked with cyber. 2 secured. Estonia fragment 60% migrated. Time was thinning. If Estonia completed migration, they'd lose reach. Rachel made decision. Engage international cyber liaison. Immediate emergency cooperation. Roland nodded. Meanwhile, she moved toward exit. Where? He asked. Hospital. Because if Samir was fail-safe, then someone would attempt access. Silencing him permanently would preserve system. As Rachel exited the loft building, her phone vibrated. Cyber. Estonia node attempting emergency shutdown. We're forcing packet capture. Can we reconstruct? Maybe partial. Partial wasn't enough. 3 fragments required. Rachel's mind moved rapidly. If Samir was dynamic key, and 2 fragments were secured, then combining them without his authorization may trigger lockout, which meant he wasn't just oversight, he was gatekeeper. The storage complex rescue hadn't prevented execution. It had interrupted internal purge. Warehouse 14 mistake. Unit 47 correction. And now, vault containment. Someone above moderators had decided Samir was liability, and if that someone realized he was alive, they would escalate. By the time Rachel arrived at the hospital, security presence had doubled. Samir lay under observation, IV lines steady. Eyes half open. Awareness returning. Rachel dismissed non-essential staff. She stood beside his bed. You weren't just a target, she said quietly. His gaze focused slowly. You're behind schedule, he murmured faintly. Not confusion. Recognition. Rachel held his eyes. Who built the platform? A long pause. Then, you're still thinking platform. Her tone remained even. Enlighten me. He inhaled shallowly. It's infrastructure. The word echoed. Infrastructure disputes. Infrastructure contracts. Infrastructure elimination. Roland entered quietly. Are you a moderator? He asked. Samir's lips curved slightly. No. Then what? Compliance architecture. Rachel felt it click fully. He wasn't auditing finances. He was auditing kill contracts, ensuring they met internal policy, risk thresholds, exposure modeling, decline decisions, including hers. You rejected a contract on me, she said. His eyes sharpened slightly.
Yes.
Why? Escalation probability too high. Silence. Which meant he had predicted exactly this outcome if her elimination had been attempted. Rachel absorbed it. You were silenced because you challenged expansion. He didn't deny it. Instead, they grew impatient. Cyber called again. Estonia fragment captured at 82% before shutdown. Reconstruction possible but unstable. Rachel calculated rapidly. 2 full fragments, 1 partial, plus Samir's dynamic compliance layer. If they combined them carefully, they might unlock transaction logs before a system reconstituted elsewhere. But doing so would expose not just clients. It would expose everyone tied to infrastructure disputes. Powerful names, power structures. Rachel looked at Samir. Will the vault open with 2 fragments and your compliance authorization? He considered carefully. If I authenticate, and if you refuse. It self-destructs. Roland exhaled slowly, meaning trust required. Rachel met Samir's gaze steadily. 3 men are dead. His expression didn't shift. I know. More will be if this persists. He studied her for several seconds. Then, you stopped the execution. Yes. A pause. And you were the declined target. Yes. Silence again. Measured. Then, bring the fragments. Rachel didn't waste time. She signaled Cyber to prepare secure integration environment at hospital. If the vault opened, this case would transform from clandestine homicide ring into systemic corruption exposure. And exposure breeds resistance. As equipment was set up around Samir's bedside, Rachel understood one thing clearly. Unit 47 hadn't been final delivery. It had been internal betrayal. Warehouse 14 hadn't been rehearsal. It had been fracture point. And now, with 2 moderators in custody, 1 fragment partial, and the compliance architect alive, the system wasn't just exposed. It was destabilized, which meant Hoover sat above moderators. A Wallace about to make their next move. By 9:18 a.m., the hospital room no longer looked like a recovery ward. It looked like a command center. Portable forensic servers lined the far wall. Encrypted drives connected through air-gapped bridges. 2 cyber analysts stood over isolated terminals, waiting for Rachel's signal. Samir Bashia sat upright now, color slowly returning to his face. Sedation had faded, but weakness lingered in his hands. An oxygen line remained in place, more precaution than necessity. Roland stood near the door, watching everyone, not just the screens. Because if Samir truly was the compliance failsafe, this moment wasn't just technical, it was strategic. Rachel stepped closer to the bed. We integrate the 2 full fragments first, she said. Samir nodded faintly. And the partial? Inject after handshake validation, he replied. If inserted prematurely, the vault interprets corruption. Cyber confirmed readiness. Fragment 1 authenticated. Fragment 2 online. Awaiting dynamic key. Samir closed his eyes briefly, not in fear. In calculation. Before we proceed, he said quietly, you need to understand something. Rachel didn't interrupt. The platform wasn't built for murder, he continued. It was built for containment. Roland's expression hardened. Containment of what? Exposure cascades. Rachel held his gaze. Translate. High-value infrastructure contracts create fragile ecosystems, Samir said. If a single whistleblower releases partial documentation without full context, markets destabilize. Projects collapse. Pension funds bleed. Public panic follows. You're justifying execution, Roland said flatly. I'm explaining the origin model, Samir replied evenly. Rachel's voice remained steady. At what point did arbitration become elimination? Samir didn't look away. When deterrence proved insufficient. Silence settled heavily. The system had rationalized murder as market stabilization, a disease disguised as risk management. Rachel gave a small nod to Cyber. Begin integration. Fragment 1 merged into the isolated vault environment. Lines of code streamed across the monitor. Fragment 2 followed. The interface remained dormant, awaiting dynamic authorization. Samir lifted his hand slowly. Once I authenticate every active contract, every client ID, every moderator routing key becomes visible, he said. And, Rachel prompted, and whoever sits above us will know instantly. Roland understood immediately. Alert trigger. Wes. Rachel didn't hesitate. Do it. Samir placed his palm against the biometric pad connected to the air-gapped system. Pulse recognition activated. Retinal confirmation requested. He leaned forward carefully. Scan complete. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then, the screen illuminated. Vault interface ACTL. Roland exhaled slowly. Cyber began immediate data mirror capture. Client ledger entries populated in rapid succession. Encrypted aliases decoded into real names. 5 high-tier clients. 2 mid-tier. 3 pending proposals. Rachel scanned the first confirmed name, industrial magnate. Second, foreign investment consortium head. Third, a senior regulatory advisor. Her jaw tightened slightly. This isn't rogue investors, Roland murmured. It's policy adjacent. Samir watched the screen with quiet detachment. You wanted architecture, he said softly. There it is. Rachel didn't respond. She scrolled. River Docks case. 2 years ago. Marked as beta implementation. Client alias converted. The name appeared. Not a gang member. Not a rival contractor. A private security board director. Rachel felt the past rearrange itself. That homicide had been testing ground for scalable enforcement. Warehouse 14 wasn't rehearsal. River Docks was prototype, and she had been circling it ever since. Cyber interrupted. We've triggered backend alert. External nodes attempting reconnect. High-volume pings. They know, Roland said. Yes, Rachel replied. On screen, a new status indicator flashed. Emergency session initiated. Samir's expression shifted for the first time. They're calling quorum, he said. Define quorum, Rachel demanded. 3 moderators plus executive override. You have 2 moderators in custody, Roland said, which means executive override is active. Rachel looked at Samir. Who holds that? He hesitated only a fraction. The founder. The word hung heavier than all others. Founder meant origin. Origin meant vision. Vision meant motive beyond profit. Rachel leaned closer. Name. Before Samir could answer, the hospital lights flickered once. Backup power engaged instantly. Cyber looked up sharply. Network intrusion attempt. External surge against hospital grid. Roland moved toward the hallway immediately. Rachel stayed focused. Founder, she repeated calmly. Samir met her eyes. You've already met him. Silence. Then, Vikram Sethi. Roland called from doorway. No. Samir replied. Rathor. A faint shake of the head. Rachel felt the pieces align slowly. You. Samir didn't flinch. I designed compliance architecture, he said evenly. I built the moderation protocols, the escrow logic, the risk thresholds. Roland stepped fully back inside. You built the system that killed 3 men. I built the system that limited it to 3. Samir corrected quietly. Rachel's voice remained level, and when it expanded beyond your thresholds, they removed my control. Unit 47 hadn't been just internal purge. It had been coup attempt. Rathor and moderators pushing scale. Samir resisting, and Sethi exploiting both. Cyber spoke urgently. Executive override attempting remote vault wipe. We're holding but not indefinitely. Rachel made decision instantly. Complete data extraction now. Prioritize client IDs and financial routing. Samir watched her carefully. You understand what happens when those names surface? Yes. Economic shock. Justice. He studied her for a long moment. You were declined because your elimination would trigger systemic collapse, he said quietly. Not because they feared you, because you're persistent. Rachel didn't respond to that. She didn't need to. On screen, financial trails populated. Currency funnels, layered shell accounts, escrow wallets tied to offshore trusts. The system wasn't small. It was embedded. Roland's phone vibrated. Tactical update, he said. Rathor is requesting to speak. Rachel didn't look away from the screen. On what grounds? He says the founder is about to do something irreversible. Samir closed his eyes briefly. He means me, he said. Rachel turned toward him slowly. Explain. If I disengage biometric presence, the vault collapses permanently. No external recovery possible. Roland stared. So they can't wipe it unless you comply. Wes. Cyber cut in again. External pressure increasing. They're attempting full grid disruption. Hospital corridor alarms sounded faintly in distance. Not fire. Power irregularity. Rachel understood. If they couldn't wipe digitally, they would eliminate physically. She turned to Roland. Full perimeter lockdown. No one enters this floor without my authorization. Roland moved immediately. Rachel stepped closer to Samir. You built this, she said quietly. You control its end. He met her gaze steadily. You're asking me to destroy the system. I'm asking you to stop it. A long pause. On screen, extraction progress reached 62%. External intrusion pressure climbing. Samir's breathing slowed deliberately. If the vault collapses, he said, all evidence dies with it. And if it survives, Rachel asked, it destabilizes infrastructure markets globally. Silence. This was the pivot. 3 dead men, 1 rescued, multiple powerful clients exposed, or system erased, status quo preserved. Rachel's voice remained calm. You rejected my contract because you calculated escalation probability. Yes. Recalculate now. He held her gaze. For several seconds, the hospital room felt suspended outside time. Then, extraction progress 79%. External override attempt intensifying. Samir shifted slightly, fingers hovering near the biometric pad. Rachel didn't blink. Choose, she said quietly. Outside the room, footsteps moved quickly down the corridor. Inside, the vault remained open, balanced between exposure and extinction. And the founder, Wee's about to decide which. Extraction progress 83%. The hospital corridor noise wasn't random. Roland's voice came through the comm channel, low and controlled. 2 men just attempted to access the elevator bank using cloned credentials. Security intercepted. They're not hospital staff. Rachel didn't look away from the screen. Armed. Unknown. Detained. External pressure on the vault spiked again. Cyber's hands moved rapidly across the keyboard. They're attempting simultaneous distributed denial and internal corruption. Whoever's running executive override has serious infrastructure. Samir watched the progress bar climb. You underestimate them, he said quietly. Rachel responded without shifting tone. No, I'm counting on them. He studied her. You think exposure deters power. It forces adaptation. And you believe adaptation favors justice. Yes. A faint breath left him. Almost a laugh, but not quite. Extraction progress 89%. Cyber leaned forward. We're seeing a new authentication attempt. Executive channel pushing biometric spoof. Rachel's eyes flicked to Samir's hand. They're trying to replicate you. Samir nodded once. They anticipated defection. Can they succeed? Not without my pulse signature. The hospital lights flickered again. Longer this time. Backup system strained. Roland stepped back into the room. Detained individuals had signal jammers on them, not assassins. Then what? Rachel asked. Failed safe disruptors. Samir's jaw tightened slightly. If the environment destabilizes enough, the vault auto-seals. Rachel understood. Chaos's eraser. No bullet required. Extraction progress 92%. Cyber spoke urgently. What can't hold the external surge much longer? Either we isolate completely, risking data corruption, or we push full mirror extraction now. Rachel made the decision instantly. Full mirror. Sacrifice speed for integrity. Data transfer rate doubled. System temperature climbed. Samir's hand hovered near the biometric pad again. You're gambling on the assumption they won't escalate beyond digital pressure, he said quietly. Rachel met his eyes. If they intended physical elimination, they wouldn't send amateurs with jammers. A beat. You still believe in thresholds, he said. Yes. Extraction progress 95%. On screen, client ledger fully mirrored. Financial routing paths 78% complete. Regulatory advisory names cross-linked. River Docs beta contract fully decrypted. Roland's phone buzzed again. Rathor insists on speaking. Says you're miscalculating the founder's psychology. Rachel didn't move. He lost his authority, Samir corrected softly. No. He lost control. Different things. External override pressure suddenly dropped. Cyber frowned. They've stopped pushing. Rachel felt the shift immediately. Why? Roland asked. Samir's voice lowered slightly. Because they know I won't collapse the vault. Rachel watched him closely. And how do they know that? He met her gaze steadily. Because if I intended to destroy it, I would have done so already. Extraction progress 100%, mirror complete. Cyber exhaled sharply. We have it. Full client ledger. Financial routing. Moderator hierarchy. Compliance protocols. Rachel didn't relax. Verify integrity. Running hash validation now. Samir slowly withdrew his hand from the biometric pad. The vault interface remained active, but inert. Executive override attempts ceased entirely. Silence filled the room. Roland looked between them. They're letting it stand. Samir answered quietly. They've recalculated. Rachel understood. The founder, whoever else operated beyond Samir, had determined that forced collapse would confirm guilt. Allowing extraction introduced legal warfare instead of covert cleanup. They would pivot to defense, discrediting, political insulation. Different battlefield. Samir leaned back against the hospital pillow. You've moved it from shadow market to courtroom, he said. Rachel's voice remained even. That's where it belongs. A cyber finished validation. Integrity confirmed. Copies secured across department servers. Roland allowed himself a controlled breath. It's over. Rachel shook her head once. No, it's visible. Visible meant indictments, subpoenas, financial shockwaves, public hearings, and retaliation through influence instead of violence. She turned to Samir. Why didn't you collapse it? He considered for a moment. Because you recalculated correctly, he said. Eliminating you 2 years ago would have escalated. Eliminating you tonight would have exposed us faster. That's not an answer, Roland said. Samir looked at Rachel. You were right about one thing. Demand grows. A pause. But so does scrutiny. Silence settled again. The system he built had crossed his own risk thresholds, and tonight, the exposure probability exceeded containment probability, so he pivoted. Rachel understood something then. Samir wasn't motivated by morality, he was motivated by stability, and now stability required transparency. Her phone vibrated. Commissioner, she answered. Yes. A pause as she listened. Understood. We have confirmed identities, she said calmly. Full ledger. Another pause. Yes, it goes beyond homicide. She ended the call. Roland studied her. Political? Yes. Pressure? Already. Samir closed his eyes briefly. The founder won't run, he said quietly. Rachel looked at him. Why not? Because founders believe they are indispensable. A new message flashed on Cyber's screen. Incoming secure channel request. Origin masked, but authenticated with high-level governmental clearance. Roland frowned. That's fast. Rachel didn't blink. Accept audio only. The voice that came through was calm. Hurried. Detective Monroe. She didn't ask who it was. You're aware of what you've opened. The voice continued. Yes. A faint exhale on the other end. The system prevented greater collapses than you understand. It also executed 3 men. Rachel replied evenly. Silence. Then, compliance was compromised. That's being addressed. Rachel glanced briefly at Samir. He didn't react. You're not denying authorship, she said. No. Roland stiffened slightly. Rachel's voice remained steady. You authorized elimination protocols. Under strict thresholds. Which expanded. Yes. A pause. You now possess information capable of destabilizing infrastructure markets globally. Rachel didn't waver. Then perhaps they need stabilizing differently. Silence again. Then, you've forced daylight, the voice said. Daylight has consequences. So does darkness. The connection terminated. Cyber confirmed trace attempt failed. Roland exhaled slowly. That was him. Rachel nodded once. Founder. Still composed. Still calculating. But no longer hidden. Samir spoke quietly from the bed. He won't escalate violently now. Rachel looked at him. Why? Because the system's utility depends on plausible deniability. And that's gone. Why, yes. Outside the hospital window, late morning light filtered through clouds. Warehouse 14, Unit 47, River Docks. Each piece now part of exposed architecture. 3 men dead, 1 nearly executed. 5 clients identified. 2 moderators in custody. 1 compliance architect alive, and a founder who had just acknowledged himself. Roland folded his arms. So what happens now? Rachel's answer came without hesitation. Now it becomes public. Because systems built in shadow rarely survive transparency intact. And for the first time since Warehouse 14, the production wasn't being filmed for a private audience. It was being prepared for the world. The press conference was scheduled for 4:00 p.m. Rachel had argued against it. The commissioner had overruled her. Control the narrative early, he'd said. Before someone else does. Now, Hours later, the evidence wall inside the task room looked less like a homicide board and more like a financial crime summit. Names, corporate structures, shell companies, cross-border transfers. 3 confirmed murders no longer stood alone. They were nodes inside a market correction engine. Roland stood beside Rachel, reviewing the indictment drafts. "Prosecutor's office is splitting charges," he said. "Homicide, conspiracy, racketeering, cybercrime, financial fraud." Rachel nodded once. "And the founder? Grand jury sealed indictment pending arrest authorization." She absorbed that. The secure call from earlier had not been a negotiation. It had been assessment, and the founder had chosen posture over flight, which meant he believed influence could still contain fallout. At 3:42 p.m., Cyber alerted. "We're seeing abnormal trading patterns across 2 infrastructure firms tied to identified clients." Rachel didn't look surprised. "Insider panic." "Yes." Stock dropping fast. The system was already reacting. Exposure had ripple effects. Roland checked his phone. Media picked up leaks. Someone inside Federal Liaison is talking. Rachel exhaled slowly. Of course they are. Control was slipping on multiple fronts now. Transparency doesn't move in straight lines. It fractures outward. At 4:00 p.m., the press room filled quickly. Rachel stood off to the side while the commissioner addressed cameras. He confirmed arrests tied to a coordinated network of contract-based violent enforcement mechanisms operating under financial dispute pretexts. Carefully worded. Not sensational, but unmistakable. When a reporter asked whether high-level business leaders were involved, the commissioner paused briefly. Yes, the room erupted. Rachel watched from the edge. This was the real inflection point. Not the arrests. Not the vault extraction. Public acknowledgement. Afterward, in a quieter hallway, Roland approached. "You realize this is going to get uglier?" "Yes." "Reputation assassinations, political attacks. Budget scrutiny." "Yes." He studied her for a second. "You okay with that?" She didn't hesitate. "They tried to eliminate oversight through murder." "A beat. I prefer scrutiny." Back at the hospital, Samir was being transferred under protective custody. 2 federal agents now stationed outside his room. He had not asked for legal counsel yet. That was telling. Rachel stepped inside before transport. "You're cooperating," she said. "Yes." "Why?" He met her eyes. "Because the founder miscalculated scale. That's not morality."
No.
Silence. "Then what?" she pressed. "Stability," he replied. He believed public trials would reduce covered expansion long term. Not out of empathy, but equilibrium. Rachel understood. Different motivations. Same outcome. Outside, news tickers flashed rapidly. Executive linked to contract killings. Digital arbitration platform tied to homicides. Markets reacted. Statements issued. Law firms mobilized. And somewhere in a high-rise office across the city, the founder watched the same headlines. At 6:18 p.m., arrest authorization came through. Location confirmed. Private residence. No signs of flight preparation. Roland joined tactical convoy. Rachel remained at command. She preferred proximity to information rather than spectacle. Bodycam feeds streamed in real time. Gated property. Minimal resistance. Door opened by uniformed house. Staff. Farmer Open, identified publicly now as Dev Malhotra, Infrastructure Consortium Chair, stood in the study when officers entered. Calm. Composed. He placed his phone down before being instructed. Detective Monroe insisted on daylight. He said quietly as cuffs were applied. Rachel watched the feed without expression. Dev Malhotra did not look like a fugitive. He looked like someone attending a board meeting, which, in many ways, this was. As he was escorted outside, media helicopters circled overhead. Transparency complete. Warehouse 14 had begun in darkness. Now the network was under open sky. Later that evening, Rachel finally returned to the task room. The board was different now. Red string replaced by official charges. Aliases replaced by legal names. The pattern was no longer hidden. Roland leaned against the desk. "You know this won't end quickly." "No." "Defense will argue market necessity. Economic harm prevention. Regulatory gaps." "Less." He studied her. "You're ready for that." She met his gaze evenly. They filmed executions for investor confidence. A pause. "I'm ready." Her phone vibrated once more. Unknown number, she answered. Silence at first. Then a familiar calm voice. Not Dev Malhotra, not Rathor. Another. You've dismantled one structure, the voice said evenly. Rachel didn't respond immediately. Who is this? A beneficiary, the voice replied. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Off what? Stability. Silence. You think this was singular, the voice continued. Meaning? She asked. Demand scales. The line disconnected. Roland saw the shift in her expression. New player. Possibly. She placed the phone down carefully. 3 murders solved. 1 attempted execution prevented. Founder in custody. Vault exposed. But the voice had been correct about one thing. Demand scales. And systems. Once proven viable. Replicate. Rachel walked to the window overlooking the city. Traffic moved normally. People unaware that, for years, violence had been packaged as dispute resolution behind closed doors. She didn't feel triumph. She felt awareness. Warehouse 14 had revealed a mistake. Unit 47 had exposed internal fracture. The vault had uncovered architecture, and today had made it visible. But visibility does not erase demand. It challenges it. Roland stepped beside her. So what now? Rachel answered without turning. Now we watch for iteration. Because industries do not vanish. They adapt. And somewhere beyond the headlines, someone had just recalculated risk. 48 hours after the arrest of Dev Malhotra, the narrative began to fracture. Not in court, in commentary. Economic analysts filled broadcast panels, debating whether the dismantled network had prevented greater systemic damage. Opinion columns reframed murder as extreme compliance failure within necessary stabilization models. Anonymous sources suggested regulatory blind spots forced private actors to improvise. Rachel watched none of it directly. She read the data. Online sentiment spikes. Coordinated bot amplification around phrases like market containment and arbitration efficiency. It wasn't spontaneous. It was mitigation strategy. Roland entered her office, carrying a thin folder. 3 defense teams just filed motions challenging vault extraction legality. On what grounds? She asked. National economic security. Rachel almost allowed herself a reaction. Almost. They're arguing disclosure endangers public infrastructure confidence. And, she prompted, the hearing is fast-tracked. Of course it was. Power doesn't panic. It reorganizes. Across the hall, cybercrimes compiled secondary findings from the Vault Mirror. Several dormant client accounts had logged in within hours of public exposure, likely assessing personal liability. 2 had already transferred significant cryptocurrency assets into fresh wallets. Flight without movement. Rachel stood and walked back to the evidence wall. 3 photographs remained centered. Arvin Kale, the journalist from the mill, the contractor from the docks. Their faces were smaller now compared to the scope of the case, but they were the only reason the case mattered. At 10:12 a.m., a quiet alert came through internal channels. Samir Bushya had formally requested protective custody under federal witness statute. Roland raised an eyebrow. He's choosing sides. No, Rachel replied. He's choosing survival. Samir understood equilibrium. With the founder arrested and moderators exposed, the architecture he built would not vanish. It would fragment. And fragments are unstable. An hour later, Federal Intelligence Liaison requested closed-door briefing. Rachel entered the secure room without file. 3 officials sat waiting. The tone was measured. Professional. One spoke first. You've disrupted a private enforcement mechanism operating in gray zones of financial oversight. It was murder, Rachel replied. Yes, the official agreed calmly. But you must understand the secondary consequences. Rachel didn't answer. Another official slid a document across the table. Projected infrastructure delays, capital flight risk, pension volatility modeling. Exposure has impact, he said. So does execution. Rachel replied evenly. Silence. Measured. You will face pressure, the first official said. Political, legal, reputational. I expect that. He studied her. And you're prepared? Wes. The meeting ended without explicit threat, but implications hung in the air. Back in her office, Roland closed the door quietly. That felt like containment. He said, It was assessment. Rachel corrected. They're deciding whether you're asset or liability. She nodded once. Outside the window, rain began again, soft at first. The same way it had the night Warehouse 14 was taped off. Her phone vibrated. Unknown encrypted number. She answered. The same calm voice from 2 nights earlier returned. You've created instability, it said. Rachel remained still. Identify yourself. Identity isn't relevant. It is to me. A brief pause. You dismantled one supplier. The voice continued. Demand remains. Others will emerge. Rachel didn't respond. Your exposure increased valuation, the voice added. Of what? Discretion. Silence. Are you threatening me? She asked evenly. No. The voice replied. Advising. The line disconnected again. Roland saw the shift in her eyes. Same voice. Yes. Trace. Unsuccessful. He exhaled slowly. So it's not over. It never was. She moved to the evidence board and added one new card. Unknown beneficiary, no name, no photo, just a blank square. 3 murders solved, 1 platform dismantled. Founder indicted. Moderators detained. Compliance architect cooperating. And now, market correction theory rebranding under new language. By late evening, news coverage began softening tone. Phrases shifted from contract killings to rogue arbitration experiment. Reframing underway. Rachel sat alone in the task room after most staff had left. The city lights reflected faintly against the glass. Her mind replayed river docks. The O-negative smear on broken window pane. The first prototype execution. Back then, she'd felt something was wrong beyond surface narrative. Now she understood why. It hadn't been gang retaliation. It had been proof of concept. She took out the old case file and placed it beside the new indictment stack. Prototype. Scale. Exposure. Iteration. Patterns repeat. Unless pressure is sustained. Her phone buzzed once more. This time, a secure message from cybercrimes. Subject secondary node activation. She opened it. Encrypted chatter detected on fringe financial forums. New alias appearing. Continuity solutions. She stared at the screen for several seconds. Demand scales. The voice had been right. But supply now operated under scrutiny, which meant early detection possible. If she stayed ahead, Roland returned quietly, coat over his shoulder. You're still here. Less. He looked at the board. New card. Iteration. He nodded slowly. So what do we call this one? Rachel didn't hesitate. Phase 2. Because Warehouse 14 had been the fracture. Unit 47 had been the exposure. The vault had been the revelation. But dismantling a system does not eliminate its blueprint. It challenges its efficiency. Outside, rain intensified. Rachel turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the board illuminated. 3 victims at center, a founder in custody, a blank card labeled unknown beneficiary, and a new alias emerging in digital shadows. She didn't feel fatigue. She felt recalculation. Somewhere, someone was studying her response curve the same way she studied theirs. Markets adapt. So do predators. But so do investigators. As she stepped into the hallway, the board remained lit behind her. Not as closure. As warning, the industry had been exposed. Now it would either dissolve or evolve. And Rachel Monroe intended to be there when it chose. 3 weeks after the indictment, the first witness recanted. Not in court, on television. The journalist's former editor appeared on a primetime panel and suggested that contextual market volatility may have motivated exaggeration around the victim's investigation. It was subtle, but deliberate. Rachel watched the clip in silence inside the task room. Roland muted the screen. They're reframing the dead, he said. Yes. 3 confirmed murders had already begun shifting from human loss to economic footnotes. That was phase 2. Discredit. Not the investigation. The victims. Cybercrimes entered with an update. We've mapped early activity linked to the new alias. Continuity solutions. Rachel looked up. Scale? Small. Closed channel. Vetting clients aggressively. Learning from exposure. Roland said quietly. Yes, Rachel replied. Continuity Solutions wasn't replacing the old platform outright. It was positioning itself as a refinement. Fewer contracts, higher thresholds, better insulation demand scales. But so does caution. Rachel walked to the board and drew a thin line from unknown beneficiary to Continuity Solutions. Any trace overlap with previous moderators? She asked. None direct. Cyber responded. But payment funnels mirror structural pattern. 3-layer crypto mixers before escrow. Different interface. Roland said. Same spine. Rachel nodded. Exactly. Evolution without identity. Later that afternoon, federal prosecutors met with her privately. Defense is leaning heavily into economic stabilization theory, one attorney said. They're arguing Malhotra prevented larger collapses by executing dissent. Rachel replied evenly.
Yes.
The prosecutor hesitated. There's pressure to narrow scope. Keep it focused on Rathor and the operational cell, meaning isolate the contractors. Protect the architecture. Rachel's expression did not shift. The founder approved thresholds. Less. And you have proof. Wes. Then narrowing is misrepresentation. Silence filled the room. The prosecutor didn't disagree, but the hesitation remained. Back at headquarters, Roland closed the door behind him. They're trying to contain it, he said. They always do. And if they succeed? Rachel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled up the vault ledger again. Even mirrored copies carried weight. Transactions, approvals, client comments, cold, clinical language attached to human termination. They can argue theory, she said quietly. They can erase data. Her phone vibrated. Encrypted channel. Unknown beneficiary again. She answered without greeting. You're predictable, the voice said calmly. Rachel leaned back in her chair. Explain. You expected replication. Less. You expected refinement. Less. And now you're waiting for escalation. She didn't deny it. A pause. Escalation won't come through violence. The voice continued. It will come through legitimacy. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. How? Regulatory arbitration frameworks. Silence. If continuity solutions embedded itself inside legal gray zones, structured as dispute mediation rather than enforcement, it could operate without overt violence. Elimination replaced by coercive leverage. Same outcome. Different optics. You believe you can outpace adaptation, the voice said. I don't need to, Rachel replied. I just need to expose it early. A faint breath on the other end. Exposure increases demand for discretion. Then I'll increase cost. Silence. Then, you're thinking in enforcement cycles. This is market behavior. And markets respond to risk, she said. The line disconnected. Roland watched her carefully. He's not threatening you, he observed. No. He's studying you. Less. That was the shift. The first platform had underestimated oversight. Continuity solutions would not. It would anticipate scrutiny, reduce noise, operate below homicide threshold. Rachel stood. Pull financial dispute cases closed quietly over the past 10 days, she said. Large-scale contracts resolved without litigation. Roland understood instantly. If violence decreases but disputes disappear, coercion replaced execution. A cyber began running the search. Within minutes, 3 high-value infrastructure conflicts had resolved abruptly. No press, no litigation trail, non-disclosure settlements. Rapid, unusual. Rachel studied the first case, whistleblower complaint withdrawn. The second, regulatory appeal dropped. The third, competing bid retracted voluntarily. Same clients as prior ledger. Roland asked. 2 overlap. Cyber confirmed. Rachel exhaled slowly. They've pivoted. No more filmed executions. No more warehouse staging. Now, quiet pressure, economic suffocation, reputational ruin, legal entanglement, all without a single bullet. Roland folded his arms. That's harder to prosecute. Less. And harder to prove criminal. Wes. Silence settled between them. The founder sat awaiting trial. Moderators negotiated plea deals. Samir prepared testimony. And yet, the mechanism had already evolved. Rachel walked back to the board and drew a second column beside Phase 2. Phase 3. Legitimized coercion. She stared at the blank space beneath it. Warehouse 14 had revealed brutality. Unit 47 had exposed structure. The vault had confirmed architecture. Continuity solutions represented sophistication. Violence replaced by plausible compliance. Her phone buzzed again. This time, not encrypted. A standard internal alert. Anonymous tip submitted through secure portal. She opened it. Single sentence. They don't need to kill when they can bankrupt. Attached was a spreadsheet. Financial pressure mapping. Targeted audits. credit downgrades, loan recalls, systematic economic strangulation. Roland leaned over her shoulder. Source: anonymous. But informed. Rachel felt it. The platform wasn't dead. It was shedding liability, evolving toward bloodless enforcement, less visible, more durable. She turned to Roland. We build a financial forensics unit. He raised an eyebrow. That's not homicide. It is, she replied quietly, just slower. Outside, evening settled over the city. Traffic moved. Markets fluctuated. Contracts signed. Behind glass towers, negotiations unfolded without gunshots. Rachel looked at the board one last time. 3 dead, 1 almost dead, 1 founder in custody, 1 beneficiary unknown, 1 evolving platform. This wasn't a closed case. It was a transition. Violence had been prototype. Coercion was iteration. And somewhere in that shift, the real test began. Because stopping bullets is visible. Stopping silence requires patience. As she turned off the lights, only the outline of the board remained in the dim glow. The system had recalculated. So would she. The first bankruptcy filed at 6:12 a.m. No press release. No warning. Just a quiet restructuring notice buried in financial filings. The company had been scheduled to testify before a regulatory subcommittee in 48 hours. Now it was insolvent. Rachel read the filing twice. Roland stood across from her desk. That's the whistleblower-linked firm from Phase 3. Yes. Coincidence? No. The spreadsheet from the anonymous tip sat open beside the bankruptcy notice. Pressure mapping. Credit downgrades. Coordinated audit triggers. Loan recalls within synchronized time windows. Continuity solutions hadn't replaced murder with mercy. It had replaced murder with suffocation. No blood. No warehouses. No suppressors. Just liquidity collapse. Rachel leaned back slowly. The founder is in custody, Roland said. Moderators cooperating. Samir testifying. And yet the mechanism persists, she replied. Because systems built on demand don't vanish when architects fall. They reconfigure. At 8:04 a.m., Cyber flagged unusual encrypted traffic linked to the continuity alias. Smaller volume than the original platform. More disciplined. No live stream architecture. No biometric failsafes. Just financial modeling scripts and automated leverage algorithms. Roland reviewed the packet capture. They built predictive collapse triggers. Yes! Targets. Companies, not individuals. He exhaled slowly. Harder to prosecute. Not impossible. Rachel stood and walked to the evidence board one final time. Phase 1. Contract execution. Phase 2. Exposure. Phase 3. Legitimized coercion under Phase 3. 3 corporate names now appeared. 1 already bankrupt. 2 showing rapid credit deterioration. No homicide. No obvious criminal statute. Just synchronized economic pressure designed to force silence. Her phone vibrated. Unknown beneficiary again. She answered. You're learning, the voice said calmly. You're adapting, she replied. Violence was inefficient. It was visible. Yes. Silence. You believe this is justice? The voice continued. I believe accountability scales. A faint pause. Accountability destabilizes. So does corruption. Another pause. You can't arrest market dynamics. No, she said evenly. But I can prosecute collusion. Silence lingered longer this time. Then, you'll need proof of coordination, the voice said. I will. And when you expose this iteration, another will follow. Probably. A soft breath. You're persistent. Was. The line disconnected. Roland watched her carefully. He's not wrong, he said. No. This doesn't end. No. She returned to her desk and opened a new file. Not homicide. Not cybercrime. Financial conspiracy. Market manipulation. Coercive restructuring patterns. Different statutes. Same intent. At noon, she met with a federal financial crimes task force. Charts replaced crime scene photos. Algorithms replaced ballistics reports. But the pattern felt identical. Pressure. Control. Elimination of dissent. Just slower. Samir appeared via secure video from protective custody. They've reduced kinetic risk to near zero, he said calmly. And increased systemic camouflage. Less. Can you map their predictive models? Rachel asked. With enough transaction data. Do it. He studied her for a moment. You're converting this into daylight again. Yes. He nodded faintly. That will escalate scrutiny. That's the point. By late evening, the bankruptcy firm's former CFO reached out through counsel, not to complain, to talk. Credit lines were pulled within 3 hours of each other. The message read, different banks, identical language. Collusion leaves patterns, even in silence. Rachel pinned the message beneath Phase 3. Warehouse 14 had shown blood. Unit 47 had shown structure. The vault had revealed architecture. Continuity Solutions was simply the next mask. But masks require coordination. Coordination leaves trace. Roland leaned against the doorway. You realize this could take years. Yes. And by then there'll be 2 versions ahead. Then we stay 3 moves forward. He allowed himself a small nod. Outside, the city moved normally. Markets opened. Deals signed. News cycles shifted to new headlines. Dev Malhotra awaited trial. Rathore negotiated plea terms. Moderators prepared depositions. And somewhere behind encrypted channels, a new iteration refined its algorithms. Rachel turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the evidence board illuminated. 3 victims remained centered. Because without them, none of this mattered. She studied their photographs for a long moment. They wanted permanence, she said quietly. Roland didn't ask who. Through elimination, she continued. A pause. We'll build permanence through record. He nodded. As they stepped out of the task room, the board remained lit behind them, not as closure, as foundation. The industry had evolved. So had the investigation. No more warehouses, no more suppressors. Now it would be subpoenas, forensic audits, financial indictments, long trials under bright lights. The platform's first version had been filmed for a private audience. This version would unfold in court. And this time, there would be no correction phase, only consequence.